Pete Fiutak, I hope you're doing well, man. Welcome into the game in T-Town.
How is it going with you? How you been?
I'm great, man. I'm great. I'm enjoying California weather. It's 54 degrees here in the middle of the day, and we got 90% chance tomorrow, 100% chance on Sunday, and about 20% chance on Monday. So ready to get wet. I did not have a rain jacket, but hopefully I don't need one. Never know, I might.
Yeah, they're just never going to put this thing in a place where it's going to be warm. I mean, if the first, for whatever reason, Tampa was supposed to be warm, it wasn't. Glendale was supposed to be warm, and it wasn't. Dallas was freezing. Yeah, last year Atlanta was rainy and awful. It's really been amazing that the first 5 years of this thing, and you haven't had 72 and sunny where in these locations.
Pete, when you begin to break this game down, we were just talking about a couple of minutes ago. Can a true freshman pocket passer beat Nick Saban?
We're about to find out because he's good enough. I don't think it's necessarily about Trevor Lawrence having to be Trevor Lawrence being the true freshman. It's about this offensive line, and it's the part of the puzzle that never got talked about. It still isn't getting talked about after the Notre Dame domination. But that offensive line is fantastic, and it gives him 10 days to throw against everybody. Notre Dame got pressure on Trevor Lawrence, and it didn't really matter. But he was able to still produce. It's just this offense can move in a variety of ways. Travis Etienne is amazing at hitting the home runs. So you've got the offensive firepower there to go along with that defense, to go along with that defensive line. The pieces are absolutely there for Clemson to pull this off. But to your point, if we're talking, next Tuesday morning and we say, okay, well, the problem was Lawrence got sacked, 5 times through 3 picks and just couldn't handle the moment when under the intense pressure of, bringing the house, then, yeah, I would be totally shocked by that.
Pete, when you look at this Clemson football team, we've also been making the argument when you look at Clemson for a couple of seconds, do we know anything about their football team? Like, and I know that sounds really, really strange, but is there any chance that this team has got here because of the schedule, or do you think this is a great football team?
I think it's a little of both, if that's not to hedge the bet here on the question. They didn't play. I mean, where's their great win? I mean, they barely beat Texas A&M on the road, but that was before Lawrence really kicked it in. They struggled with Syracuse, but that's when Lawrence got hurt. So they were questionable, but you're right. I mean, beating Pitt, whatever. The ACC was awful. Notre Dame, Notre Dame had a good resume. It was a very, very good team. It was very limited, and it was leaking oil, and you could kind of see that coming. But it might also be a case where the talent is so undeniable that, all right, it wanted to get here. This is the moment. It's kind of like the thing with Georgia and like the Sugar Bowl. If Georgia's playing that as a college football playoff game, I'm guessing that's a different team that showed up, the one that showed up against Texas. Clemson might have had an easy schedule. It might not have been that tested all throughout the year. But at the same time, it just might be that good to rise up and rock because there's so much NFL talent on the team.
We're talking to Pete Fiutak, collegefootballnews.com, collegefootballnews.com, National College Football Analyst, as we're breaking it down and begin to think about this matchup in this game. When you look at it from a Clemson perspective, there's a lot of different ways that they can win the game. I think Alabama can play its best game and still lose. But when you look at that secondary, Jake Bentley, the number that jumps out at me, 510 yards against that secondary, and you're telling me they're going to have to go up against Tua Tagovailoa, which is a lot better quarterback than Jake Bentley? That's a lot of yardage. I didn't watch South Carolina and Clemson, but the stats are really, really it's grabbing me.
Yeah, I mean, during that game, just kind of watch how Clemson also just rolled them, too. So it wasn't the stats were kind of amazing, but Clemson had that thing pretty much for most of the way. It's alarming, and that's the thing to kind of be concerned about for Clemson, on that side. But at the same time, this offense is strong too. I mean, just the thing about this that would scare me a little bit as an Alabama fan is that it doesn't get the hype, it doesn't get the publicity of Oklahoma's offense, but it's every bit as effective, every bit as good, and every bit as explosive, and they have a defense. So if it just depends on how fresh Alabama is after that Orange Bowl, because there's obviously a huge difference between having a month off and just having these, few days off, these 8 days off between games. And we'll see how fresh those legs are at this point, because it's not the same team it was on the 29th when they went into Miami. So there's a lot there. Alabama's better. They should win this game. But this is also a Clemson team on a mission. They're ripping everybody apart lately. And like you said, South Carolina threw up a bunch of yards, and they got just blown out.
Yeah, it's one of those topics of conversation when you begin to kind of break it down and you begin to kind of think about it. I mean, it's going to be a great game. Pete, I'm curious, how much does the national level of things, when we talk about Nick Saban going past Coach Paul Bear Bryant, what kind of goes through your mind? Does that grab anything on the national level, or is that more of a local Tuscaloosa conversation?
That's a local thing. I mean, here's the sad part about it. No one's talking about this game. It's utterly ridiculous that you have the two-star programs. We've been waiting to see these two teams play all year. It's the fourth year in a row they put on some historically great national championship games. This is going to be a great game no matter what. These are the two best teams, and it's all about wild card weekend. It just is. There's not a national fan base for Clemson. It's a fun team. It's a great team. It's just nobody knows where Clemson is. It's not one of those schools that gets that national attention. And Alabama, as great as it is, it doesn't necessarily have from my perspective, at least what I've seen, just the national sort of love that people had for the USC teams in the 2000s, and maybe Miami in the 1990s, and even Texas to a certain extent, or Michigan, Ohio State, depending on the year. So these are two teams. It's like, okay, they're going to play, but like you mentioned, it's in Santa Clara. Like the fan bases, I mean, it's better than I do. I mean, they're tapped out. For them to travel to this game it's such a stretch after going to so many games over the last several years. There's no secondary market for tickets. It's in a bad area for college sports. And the conversation still, when I'm going on other radio stations, has been as much about the process and the 8-team playoff possibilities and even the bowl games this year and the coaching changes, as much as the game. Because it really is crazy because you have such an amazing group of wild card weekend games.
AP, I'm looking at tickets right now on one of these wonderful ticket websites, okay? Let's see here. I see 123 for a ticket, 123 for a ticket, 127 for a ticket. Let me go down to the lower deck here. 150, 160, down in lower level end zone 138. You get the point. $200 should put you on the 50-yard line.
You couldn't get into the stadium last year in Atlanta for anything less than $2,000. Once that really started to kick in, and the Georgia people got all over it, that was the hot. I have never seen a crowd that was. I mean, obviously everyone was into that game, but you're talking Alabama versus Georgia in Atlanta. I mean, that was about as crazed an atmosphere of just the fan bases as you could possibly find. And now it's just sort of like, okay, it's just there's just not anything there to this game, mainly because Santa Clara is just kind of dead when it comes to sports. If this was played in like Pasadena, then there'd be a little more of an element to this, or even if it was an AT&T Stadium or one of the more traditional places. There just isn't that sort of like, hey, cool, they're in Santa Clara. It's just not there. Now, with all that said, we know how this works. There's no buzz right now. There's not going to be any buzz except until probably the afternoon of the game, because all morning, again, everyone's going to talk about the Chicago Bears being in the wild card. Lamar Jackson, the Colts, Andrew Luck. There's so many amazing storylines in this NFL thing. However, this should be a great game, and this should be when that happens, that everyone talks about it after the fact. It's just a shame that the showcase game for this, this great sport is being overshadowed right now.
We were talking with Pete Fiutak, and you know that is the part. But I mean, Pete, you got. I mean, who do you blame? Who should get the fault?
I think it's just the one. It's on the schedule. It's just putting this. You know when the NFL is. You know what the NFL does. And look, think of it this way: the Final Four has become a thing because it's right at the time when there's nothing else really going on. You know, baseball's about to kick in full force, but it's not there yet. And, you know, so it's got that whole weekend to itself, and it builds up into this big thing. Part of the problem is we've gone through this grind of meaningless bowl games, and we had the build-up. Everyone was into the college football playoff Saturday. That was a big, big day. It was everyone wanted to see all these games. All the big games were happening. At Saturday all to himself. And the games are kind of duds, and now it's like, okay, well, let's watch Clemson and Alabama. But this bowl season just dragged on for too long. It would almost be better if they were able to figure out a way to play the semifinals earlier and do this on, like, the last game on New Year's Day when they usually play the Sugar Bowl. And so do it then, and then the college football season is over then. If you did it that way, that New Year's Day, New Year's weekend would just be all college football, and it would just be an amazing event.
All right, Pete, the time has come. We talked with you back in June, July. You told us that you thought Alabama and Clemson would be here. That was kind of the pick. It was easy for a lot of people, but they were able to get the job done. Both teams are 14-0. Yeah. We're going to get our first 14-0, and I think that's the part of the conversation that I don't want to get overshadowed. I mean, these are – I mean, would you put this in Texas, USC, 2006 Rose Bowl? I mean, is these teams on that level?
At least. I mean, the teams are absolutely – there's not the anger that there was then. That was more like you had this historic USC team that was building and building and building that they had – you already had coming back, you know, Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart, all the rock stars in L.A., and you had this Texas team that was building and building and had Vince Young and had all these angry players. That was kind of a whole different animal. This one, you have so many young guys, and it's just a lot of replaceable parts that you don't have the star power there other than Tua and the defensive lineman for Clemson. But a lot of people don't know who Christian Wilkins is. With all that said, these two teams are absolutely as good as any we've seen in a national championship game. The NFL talent on both sides of the ball is just off the charts good. Next year is going to be tank for Tua when it comes to the NFL draft because he's probably going to be the number one pick in next year's draft. The year after that's probably going to be tank for Trevor, where Trevor Lawrence becomes the first overall draft pick in the 2021 draft. And so the talent is undeniable. These two teams are great. I think they put on an amazing show.
Who's going to win the game, Pete?
Alabama. I hate doing this because I despise picking anybody in college to not cover a 6-point spread. But Alabama's been able to win national championships and not cover in these things. I'm going to pick Alabama, but not to cover. Be it Clemson either winning it outright or keeping it close. I think the Tigers are good enough to make this a fight and make Alabama sweat it out. But Alabama's going to pull this out because they're at the end of when it all comes down to it, they will be able to put together a full 4 quarters. And to your original point, if I got to pick Tua or Trevor Lawrence, I'm picking Tua. And look, Jake Fromm almost did it last year. It is possible for a freshman to win one of these things against Alabama. But let's see what they do.
Pete Fiutak, collegefootballnews.com, collegefootballnews.com. Pete, you're the best, man. Appreciate you for being a part of the show.
Enjoy it out there. Have fun.